for your neck. And the thing kind of opened up like a clamshell, you know. He put this head box over my head and then laid me down on the seat.
Hooker had made the head box himself with a specific purpose in mind.
The purpose of the head box was to prevent people from hearing you scream.
I got very scared, and I had convinced myself that I couldn't breathe, and so I was just sitting there hyperventilating, and just every breath I thought, this is my last breath, I can't breathe. I actually had to kneel down on the floor, kind of get down on my belly and kind of crawl in, you know.
How long would you spend in there per day?
Well, generally probably about 22 hours. It was really hard in the box. I mean, there was several times that I just thought, I just can't do this, not even for another second.
Colleen Stan vanished on a spring day in 1977. After accepting a ride from what looked like a safe family, a husband, a wife, and a child. But that ordinary choice became the beginning of 7 stolen years. She would be locked away, threatened, and made to believe a secret organization would kill her loved ones if she tried to escape. The most haunting part is not only that Colleen was trapped inside a box, it is that Cameron Hooker built another prison inside her mind. One so powerful that even freedom looked like danger to her for years afterward. Before this case became known as the story of the girl in the box, it was the story of a young woman whose freedom was taken in stages. Not all at once, not only with locks, ropes, or threats. Colleen Stan was trapped first by physical force, but over time, Cameron Hooker built something even harder to see, a world where fear replaced reality. That is what makes this case so disturbing. It is not simply a story about captivity. It is a story about control, so calculated that the victim could be near a door, near a phone, even near people who loved her, and still believe escape would bring something worse. Cameron did not only want Colleen silent, he wanted her convinced that silence was the only way to keep her family alive. Cases like this force people to ask uncomfortable questions. Why did she not run? Why did she not tell someone? Why did she return when she had moments outside the house? But those questions can miss the most important truth. Colleen was not living in the same reality as the people asking them. Her reality had been shaped by years of threats, punishment, isolation, and deception. She had been taught that every choice had consequences beyond herself, and when fear is repeated long enough, it stops feeling like fear. It starts feeling like fact. This is where the case becomes more than a crime story. It becomes a study in coercive control, the kind of control that does not always leave. Visible chains, the kind that can make a person doubt their own instincts, their own safety, and even their right to be rescued. Cameron Hooker created an invisible prison around Colleen, long before the world understood how powerful that kind of prison could be. The box became the symbol of this case because it was physical. It could be described, it could be shown. People could understand the horror of a person being confined in darkness. But the deeper horror was psychological. The deeper horror was that Cameron convinced Colleen that the outside world was not freedom. He made freedom look dangerous. He made obedience look like survival. That is why the story still matters. Not because suffering needs to be repeated, not because the details need to be sensationalized, but because Colleen's survival reveals something many people still struggle to understand. A captive person does not always respond the way outsiders expect. Trauma changes the way danger is measured. Control changes the way choices appear. And sometimes the hardest lock to break is the one placed inside the mind. Colleen Stan survived more than 7 years of captivity. But survival did not erase what happened. It only gave her the chance to finally tell the truth. And the truth is this: Cameron Hooker did not just steal years from her life. He tried to steal her sense of reality, her sense of safety, and her belief that escape was even possible. Before the world knew Colleen Stan as the girl in the box, she was a 20-year-old woman with a life that was still open in front of her. She was young, independent, and trusting enough to believe that the world still had room for ordinary kindness. On May 19th, 1977, she was not walking into a crime story. She was traveling to see a friend, moving through the day with the simple expectation that she would arrive safely. Colleen was hitchhiking through Northern California, a choice that may sound unthinkable to many people today, but in the 1970s, it was not seen in the same way. Young people did it. Travelers did it. It was risky, but it was also common enough that people did not always recognize the danger until it was too late, and Colleen was not careless. According to accounts of the case, she had already turned down other rides that made her uncomfortable. Then Cameron Hooker pulled up. He was not alone. His wife Janice was in the car. Their child was there too. To Colleen, that mattered. A man traveling with his wife and baby did not look like a threat. It looked like safety. It looked like the kind of ride a young woman could accept after rejecting others. That detail is one of the most painful parts of this case because Cameron did not need to appear frightening. He used the image of a family to lower her guard. At that moment, Colleen had no reason to imagine what was waiting for her. She did not know she was stepping into a vehicle with a man who had already prepared for control. She did not know that this ride would lead to years of captivity. She did not know that the people in that car would become the center of a nightmare that would take more than 7 years to escape. That is important to remember. Colleen was not a symbol yet. She was not a headline. She was not a cautionary tale. She was a person making a decision inside the information she had at the time, and the information she saw told her that this car was safer than the others. That is how predators often operate. They do not always arrive looking like danger. Sometimes they arrive looking ordinary. Sometimes they borrow trust from the people around them. Sometimes the trap is not built from darkness, but from familiarity. For Colleen, the trap began with a ride she believed she could survive. A few minutes inside that car changed the direction of her life. The road that was supposed to take her toward a friend instead carried her toward a house in Red Bluff, California, where Cameron Hooker would begin turning fear into a system and a young woman's ordinary day into one of the most haunting captivity cases in American criminal history. To understand how Colleen Stan ended up inside Cameron Hooker's car, it is important to understand the world around that moment. This was not an era of smartphones, location sharing, emergency alerts, or instant communication. In 1977, if someone was traveling and plans changed, family members could not simply check a map and see where they were. Silence had more room to stretch. A missed call could stay unexplained for days. A person could be moving through the world, and the people who loved them might have no way to know where that person had gone. Hitchhiking also carried a different meaning then. It was never without danger, but it was more visible, more common, and more socially familiar than it is today. Young people used it to get from one town to another. Travelers used it when they had limited money or no reliable transportation. Roads were full of small decisions made in passing. Which car to accept, which driver to trust, which feeling to listen to. Colleen had already shown caution. She did not take every ride offered to her. She made judgments. She rejected rides that did not feel right. That detail matters because it pushes back against the easy and unfair question that so often follows cases like this. Why did she get in the car? The better question is, what did Cameron Hooker use to make the car look safe? Because when he stopped for Colleen, he did not appear as a lone man asking a young woman to trust him. He appeared with his wife. He appeared with a child. He appeared inside the shape of a family. And for a young woman trying to make the safest choice available on the side of a road, that image mattered. Predators often understand trust better than the people they target. They know what lowers suspicion. They know what looks harmless. They know how to hide danger behind ordinary details. Cameron did not need to say much at first. The scene around him was already doing some of the work. A wife in the car, a baby nearby, a normal-looking family on an ordinary day. That is what makes this part of the story so chilling. The trap did not announce itself as a trap. It looked like relief. Colleen was not stepping into a dark alley. She was not following a stranger into an abandoned building. She was accepting a ride from people who seemed safer than the ride she had already refused. In that moment, the presence of Janice and the child functioned like a disguise. Whether Janice fully understood the depth of what Cameron was preparing at that exact moment is part of the broader complexity of the case. But for Colleen, the effect was immediate. The car looked less dangerous because it contained a family. And that is where this story begins to reveal one of its most disturbing patterns. Cameron Hooker's control did not start with the box. It started with presentation, with appearance, with the careful use of normalcy. Normalcy can be one of the most effective masks for danger. A clean car, a calm voice, a wife in the passenger seat, a child in the back. These are details people associate with safety, responsibility, and stability. But in Colleen's case, those details became part of the mechanism that brought her closer to captivity. Nothing about her decision required her to be reckless. Nothing about it makes her responsible for what happened next. She made a choice based on the information in front of her, and Cameron exploited that information. He understood that fear does not always open the door. Sometimes reassurance does. This is why the beginning of the case cannot be reduced to a warning about hitchhiking alone. The deeper warning is about manipulation. It is about how danger can borrow the appearance of safety. It is about how someone can weaponize the trust attached to family, marriage, and parenthood. For Colleen, the world narrowed gradually. First to the car, then to Cameron's control, then to the house in Red Bluff, then eventually to the box. But before all of that, there was one ordinary roadside decision made under circumstances that seemed safer than they were. She believed she was getting closer to her destination. Instead, every mile was carrying her farther away from the life she knew. The ride did not become terrifying all at once. That is one of the reasons this case is so unsettling. At first, there was still the illusion of normal life. Colleen Stan was inside a car with a man, his wife, and their child. The road was still moving beneath them. The day still looked ordinary. Nothing about the first moments told her that she had just entered the place where the next 7 years of her life would begin to disappear. On May 19th, 1977, Colleen was traveling through Northern California. She was trying to get to a friend's birthday. She had already made choices that day, already assessed people, already rejected rides that did not feel safe. So when Cameron Hooker stopped and Colleen saw Janice in the car with a baby, the situation looked different. It looked less threatening. It looked like the safer option. And that is where the danger started hiding in plain sight. For a short time, the ride continued as if nothing was wrong. The presence of Janice made the car feel normal. The presence of the child made it feel even more harmless. To Colleen, this did not look like a trap. It looked like a family doing something kind for a traveler on the side of the road. But Cameron Hooker already knew where this was going. At some point during the drive, the atmosphere changed. The road that was supposed to take Colleen closer to her destination began carrying her away from it. Cameron turned off the expected route. The car moved into a more isolated area. In that moment, the ordinary details that had made the ride seem safe began to lose their meaning. Then, Janice and the child were no longer the protection Colleen thought they were. This is where the timeline sharpens. The mask dropped. Cameron stopped the car, and the situation shifted from suspicious to unmistakably dangerous. He pulled a knife. He forced Colleen into submission. The man who had presented himself as a harmless husband and father now revealed the violence that had been underneath the entire time. For Colleen, everything narrowed in seconds. The road was no longer a road. The car was no longer transportation. The man in front of her was no longer a stranger, giving her a ride. He was her captor. Cameron restrained her. He placed a heavy wooden box over her head, cutting her off from the outside world almost immediately. It was not just a method of control. It was a message. From the beginning, Cameron wanted Colleen disoriented, frightened, and dependent on what he allowed her to know. He wanted to reduce her world before she even reached his house. That was the first box.
It's for your neck, and the thing kind of opened up like a clamshell, you know? He put this head box over my head and then laid me down on the seat.
The purpose of the head box was to prevent people from hearing you scream. And it was also a way of blinding the kidnapped person and controlling them.
Not the one that would later become infamous beneath the bed. This first box came earlier, inside the car, when darkness was forced over her and the world disappeared before she could understand what was happening. Before we go further into this case, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Stories like Colleen's are not told to exploit pain, but to understand the warning signs, the psychology of control, and the ways predators can disguise danger as safety. If you believe these stories should be remembered with care and respect, subscribe and stay with us, because from this point on, Colleen's life changed completely. Cameron drove her to the home he shared with Janice in Red Bluff, California. What should have been a brief ride toward a friend became the beginning of a captivity that would last more than 7 years. The attack on the road was only the first stage. Once Colleen entered that house, Cameron's control would become more organized, more deliberate, and more psychologically destructive. He did not only intend to keep her from running, he intended to make her believe running was impossible. That is what separates this case from a simple abduction timeline. The crime did not end when Cameron got Colleen into the house. That was where the larger system began. The restraints, the threats, the isolation, and eventually the lie about the company, all grew from this first moment of control. On the morning of May 19th, Colleen was a young woman traveling toward a birthday visit. By the end of that day, she had been taken into a world built around fear. And for years, Cameron Hooker would work to make that fear feel stronger than freedom itself. When Colleen Stan was brought into the Hooker home in Red Bluff, California, the crime changed shape. It was no longer only an abduction on the side of a road. It became something more organized, more deliberate, and far more frightening. Cameron Hooker had taken her body first. Now he began working on her mind. The house did not look, from the outside, like the setting of one of the most disturbing captivity cases in American history. That is part of what makes this story so hard to process. There was no obvious warning written across the walls, no public sign of the nightmare beginning inside. It was an ordinary home in an ordinary neighborhood, occupied by a husband, a wife, and a child. But for Colleen, the moment she entered that house, ordinary life ended. Cameron controlled the environment immediately. He controlled what she could see. He controlled when she could move. He controlled when she could speak. Everything around her began to shrink. The road, the open air, the simple possibility of choosing where to go. All of that was gone. Her world had been reduced to Cameron's rules. This is where the cruelty of the case becomes clear, but it is also where the story must be told carefully. The details of what Colleen endured were severe, and later court proceedings would describe years of torment, threats, restraint, and intimate violence. But the purpose of telling this story is not to turn her suffering into spectacle. The purpose is to understand how Cameron created a system where escape became harder with each passing day.
He pulled out the ice chest from underneath me. So I was hanging there, like in the shape of a Y. And of course I was experiencing a lot of pain like I had never experienced before. And then it was at that point that he grabbed a whip and he started whipping me and told me to shut up. I got very scared and I had convinced myself that I couldn't breathe, and so I was just sitting there hyperventilating, and just every breath I thought, this is my last breath, I can't breathe. My ankles one to each corner on the bottom and put my wrists one to each corner on the top and left me there for the day. I didn't understand what was going on, who these people were, or why they were doing these things to me.
At first, control was physical. Colleen was restrained. She was isolated. She was made to understand that Cameron could hurt her whenever he chose. Fear became immediate. It was not theoretical. It was not something she imagined. It was taught to her through what happened inside that house. But Cameron did not stop there. Physical captivity can sometimes leave a person searching for a chance, waiting for a door, listening for a mistake. Cameron seemed to understand, so he began building a second layer of captivity, psychological control. He needed Colleen to believe that even if she found a way out, the danger would follow her. He needed her to believe that escape would not save her. It would punish the people she loved.
I read through the contract, and I was very upset. I was shaking and crying, and pretty much it said, that I was signing over my body and soul to him. He really built them up to be this huge organization in my mind, and I totally believed it. Felt pretty hopeless. I felt like, well, I guess this is my fate, I had gotten myself into this bad situation, and I really didn't know how to get out.
That was the beginning of the larger prison. Over time, Cameron introduced the lie that would become central to the case, the company. He described it as a powerful secret organization that was always watching, always listening, and capable of reaching Colleen's family if she disobeyed. It was not real, but Colleen did not know that. She was young, isolated, terrified, and trapped with a man who controlled almost every piece of information she received. In that environment, a lie does not have to be believable to the outside world. It only has to be repeated inside a world where the victim has no safe way to test it. That is what Cameron exploited. He created rules. He created consequences. He created the feeling that her family's lives depended on her obedience. And once that belief took root, the walls around Colleen became more than physical. They followed her, even when she was not locked in place. They followed her in her thoughts. They followed her in every calculation she made about survival. This is one of the most difficult parts of the case to understand from the outside. People often imagine captivity as a locked room and freedom as an open door, but Colleen's reality was not that simple. Cameron was training her to see the open door as another trap. He was teaching her that silence was safety, that obedience was protection, and that resistance could get her family killed. The infamous box would later become the image most people remembered. It was horrifying because it was tangible. People could picture it. They could understand the darkness, the confinement, the physical impossibility of normal life inside such a space. But before the box became a symbol, Cameron had already begun building something less visible. He was building a belief system. Inside that house, Colleen's identity was attacked piece by piece. Her choices were taken. Her voice was controlled. Her sense of time and safety began to depend on the person hurting her. That is the logic of coercive control. It does not only ask, how do I stop this person from leaving? It asks, how do I make this person afraid to leave even when they can? And that is why the first days inside the Hooker home mattered so much. They were the foundation. The abduction on the road brought Colleen into Cameron's reach. But what happened next was designed to keep her there. The restraints, the threats, the rules, the lies, each one served the same purpose. Cameron wanted to make captivity feel permanent. He wanted to make the outside world feel unreachable. And most of all, he wanted Colleen to believe that survival meant submission. By the end of those early days, Colleen was no longer just a kidnapped young woman waiting for a chance to run. She was a captive inside a system built to convince her that running would destroy everything she loved. The first hours after Colleen Stan disappeared did not unfold like a modern missing person emergency. There was no cell phone going unanswered on a kitchen table, no location marker suddenly stopping on a map, no digital trail for her family to follow. In 1977, silence could spread quietly. A person could miss an expected arrival, and the people waiting for them might not know whether to panic, keep waiting, or assume plans had simply changed. That uncertainty gave Cameron Hooker time. For Colleen's family, the fear did not arrive with one clear announcement. It came through absence. She did not reach the place she was supposed to reach. She did not return with an easy explanation. The people who loved her were left with the kind of questions that do not have edges at first. Did she change her plans? Did she decide to go somewhere else? Was she delayed? Was she hurt? Was she alive? Those questions are part of the cruelty of disappearance. Families are forced to live between hope and dread, and both can feel equally painful. Hope tells them there may be a reasonable answer. Dread tells them the silence itself may be the answer.
She never, ever didn't make contact with us. And we knew that when she didn't call, something was really wrong.
They went on a journey up north looking for her. And when they didn't come back with her, that's when I just basically really knew something major was wrong.
But Colleen's case was even more complicated because she did not remain completely unreachable forever. Cameron's control was not built only on hiding her from the world. It was built on allowing just enough contact to confuse the truth. Over time, there would be controlled messages, controlled appearances, and carefully managed moments that made the outside world harder to alert. That is what made the captivity so difficult to see. From the outside, a person who occasionally communicates may not look like someone being held prisoner. A young woman who appears briefly may not fit the image people expect of a captive. But Colleen was not free in those moments. She was moving inside a cage Cameron had designed. And by then, that cage existed as much in her mind as it did inside the house. For her family, every limited contact carried a terrible contradiction. On one hand, it meant Colleen was alive. That alone would have mattered. It would have given them something to hold on to. But on the other hand, it also created confusion. If she was alive, why was she not home? If she could speak, why did she not explain? If she could appear, why did something still feel wrong? The truth was that Colleen was being forced to perform survival. She could not simply tell the people she loved what had happened. Cameron had made sure of that through threats and psychological conditioning. He had taught her that honesty would not save her. He had taught her that the people closest to her would pay the price if she disobeyed. So when the outside world came close, Colleen did not experience it as rescue. She experienced it as risk. That is one of the most haunting realities of this case. The people who loved Colleen were not separated from her only by distance. They were separated by a lie. Cameron had built that lie carefully. He made her believe that a powerful organization was watching. He made her believe that escape would lead to punishment. He made her believe that silence was the only way to protect her family. So the immediate aftermath of the abduction was not just panic. It was concealment. It was confusion. It was a crime being hidden behind controlled fragments of normal life. Inside the Hooker home, Colleen was learning that her captor controlled every part of her existence. Outside that home, her family was left trying to understand a disappearance that did not behave like a disappearance. There was no clean break, no simple ransom demand, no clear trail leading to the house in Red Bluff. And that gave Cameron exactly what he needed. Time. Time to isolate her. Time to frighten her. Time to make his rules feel permanent. Time to turn a young woman's survival instincts against her own freedom. For Colleen, the world outside still existed. Her family still existed. Help still existed. But Cameron had already begun convincing her that reaching for any of it would destroy the people she was trying to protect. To understand why Colleen Stan remained trapped for so long, the story has to move beyond the physical space of the Hooker home. The house mattered. The locked spaces mattered. The restraints mattered. But the deeper mechanism of captivity was not built from wood, rope, or darkness alone. It was built from fear, repetition, and a lie that Cameron Hooker made feel larger than the world outside. That lie was called the company. Cameron told Colleen that the company was a powerful secret organization. According to the story he created, this organization had people everywhere. They watched. They listened. They punished disobedience. And if Colleen tried to escape, or if she told anyone what was happening, her family would be harmed. It was fiction. But inside the world, Cameron controlled. Fiction could become survival law. Colleen had no safe way to test what he was saying. She had been abducted, isolated, threatened, and harmed. Cameron controlled what she knew. When she moved, what she was allowed to say, and what consequences followed disobedience. In that environment, the truth did not arrive clearly. It had to fight through fear first, and fear had been there longer. That is why the company became so powerful. Not because it was real, but because Cameron attached it to the one thing Colleen could not risk: her family. If the threat had only been against her, escape might have looked different. But Cameron made the danger feel collective. He made her believe that one wrong move from her could bring punishment down on the people she loved most. That is coercive control at its most destructive. It does not only ask a victim to obey, it teaches them that obedience is protection. It turns silence into an act of love. It makes the captive believe that suffering alone is the price of keeping others safe. This is also why the question, "Why didn't she just run?" fails to understand the case. Colleen was not making decisions inside normal conditions. She was making decisions inside a reality Cameron had engineered. Her choices were surrounded by threats. Her perception of safety had been damaged. The outside world still existed, but Cameron had made it feel contaminated by danger. The physical details of the captivity were horrifying, and later became the reason the case was remembered by the public. Colleen was kept in confined spaces, including the box that gave the case its most infamous name. But if the story stops there, it misses the larger truth. The box was only one part of the prison. The company was another. The rules were another. The isolation was another. Each piece reinforced the next. The box controlled her body. The lie controlled her choices. And Cameron controlled the space between them. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel. Cases like Colleen Stan's are difficult to tell, but they matter because they reveal patterns people still misunderstand today. Manipulation, isolation, coercive control, and the way predators can make fear feel like fact. If you believe these stories should be told with care, respect, and attention to the evidence, subscribe and stay with us. Because the longer Colleen remained in that house, the more Cameron's system hardened around her. He created a structure where every part of life had to pass through him. Permission, punishment, movement, silence, food, sleep, contact with the outside world. All of it became part of his authority. Over time, the goal was not only to keep Colleen from leaving, it was to make her believe that leaving would be the most dangerous thing she could do. That belief explains some of the details that later shocked the public. It explains why moments that looked like opportunities from the outside did not feel like opportunities to Colleen. It explains how a captive person could be near other people and still remain silent. It explains how psychological control can survive even when physical control briefly loosens. Cameron had made the threat feel portable. It followed Colleen, beyond the room, beyond the box, beyond the house itself. If she saw another person, the threat was still there. If she heard a phone, the threat was still there. If she imagined running, the threat arrived first. Piece by piece, the evidence of this case shows a system designed to collapse Colleen's confidence in rescue. Cameron did not need to watch every second if he could convince her that someone else was always watching. He did not need to block every doorway if he could make the doorway feel fatal.
You just run away.
Because I truly believed in the company. He had implied that, there were other members of the company living in the area, in the neighborhood, and basically they told me, go ahead.
That is why the mechanics of this captivity were so devastating. They were not random acts of cruelty. They were part of a pattern meant to train fear into obedience. A pattern meant to turn Colleen's love for her family into a weapon against her own escape. And once that pattern took hold, the prison no longer existed only inside the Hooker home. It existed everywhere Colleen believed the company could reach. One of the most difficult parts of Colleen Stan's case to understand is also one of the most important. After years of captivity, Colleen was not always hidden from the world in the way people might imagine. There were moments when Cameron Hooker allowed the outside world to come close, moments when she was not sealed away in darkness, moments when, from the outside, someone might have looked at her and believed she had a chance. But captivity does not always look the same from the inside. In 1981, Cameron allowed Colleen to visit her family. By then, she had already spent years under his control. Years of threats, Years of punishment. Years of being told that the company was watching. Years of being made to believe that her family's lives depended on her obedience. So when Colleen returned to the people who loved her, she was not returning as a free person. She was returning as someone carrying Cameron's prison inside her mind. That is what makes this part of the story so haunting. She was near her family. She could see them. She could hear their voices. She could stand in a familiar place, surrounded by people who would have wanted nothing more than to save her. But Cameron had already trained her to believe that telling the truth would not save anyone. It would destroy them. To an outsider, the moment looks impossible. Why not speak? Why not whisper the truth? Why not wait until Cameron was gone and ask for help? But those questions assume Colleen was weighing choices in a normal world. She was not.
It was kind of a precedent, but that the company had approved for me to go home and visit my family. He told me to tell my family that he was my boyfriend, that his name was Mike. No, that he was my fiance, actually. We were going to get married.
We were too scared to push her, for fear that we didn't know if she was in a cult and there were people all around her, and we knew she was under stress, though, I can tell you that. I mean, it was very visible.
Do you want to tell them the truth?
Oh yeah, I wanted to scream it out, but I too was so afraid, because I was afraid for their safety. I was afraid for my own safety, because I truly believed in the company, and I truly believed that these people were backing this guy up.
Her world had been rewritten by fear. Cameron had convinced her that danger was not limited to the house in Red Bluff. He had made danger feel everywhere. In the walls, in the street, in the phone lines, around her family, around every possible escape route. He had made her believe that even if she reached help, the company would still reach the people she loved. That is how deep the control had gone. The visit with her family was not proof that Colleen was free. It was proof that Cameron's psychological control had become powerful enough to survive distance. He did not need her locked in the box every second if he had already made her believe the consequences of disobedience would follow her anywhere. And that is the detail that changes the way this case has to be told. The horror was not only that Colleen was confined. The horror was that even temporary contact with the outside world did not automatically break the spell of terror Cameron had created. Her family represented love, safety, and rescue. But Cameron had attached danger to all of those things. He had taken the very people Colleen wanted to protect and turned them into the reason she stayed silent. That kind of control is difficult to explain because it does not make sense from a place of safety. But trauma does not operate by ordinary logic. A person who has been threatened for years may not ask, "What is most likely true?" They may ask, "What if he is right?" And when the possible cost is the death of your family, even a lie can feel too dangerous to challenge. So Colleen did what Cameron had conditioned her to do. She stayed silent, not because she accepted captivity, not because she wanted to return, not because she had no instinct to survive. She stayed silent because she had no instinct to survive. She stayed silent because Cameron had twisted survival into obedience. He had made her believe that protecting her family meant sacrificing herself. That visit is one of the clearest examples of why this case cannot be reduced to a locked room. Colleen was standing near the people who could have helped her, and still the prison held. Not because the door was closed, because fear had become the door.
They were like, "Oh, it's Mike," and so I got on the phone and he said, "I'm coming to get you." And I kind of argued with him because I said, "Well, but I thought..." Almost exactly 24 hours to the hour, he was back.
I asked you about the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
And looking to all intents and purposes like you were very happy to do that.
I was very happy to be with my family.
I'm talking about the photograph with him.
It wasn't because I was happy with him, no. I felt that I had to act like he was my fiance, you know? This was the man I wanted to marry, even though that was very far from the truth. Guess I win an Academy Award for that one.
For years, Cameron Hooker's control depended on one central lie. He had convinced Colleen Stan that the company was real, that it had power beyond the walls of the house, and that it could punish her family if she disobeyed. That lie did not need proof. It only needed fear. And for a long time, fear was enough. But lies built on control do not always collapse all at once. Sometimes they crack slowly. The turning point in Colleen's case did not begin with police breaking down the door. It did not begin with a neighbor discovering the truth. It did not begin with a dramatic rescue scene from the outside. It began inside the same household, where the cruelty had been hidden for years, with Janice Hooker. Janice is one of the most complicated figures in this case. She was not an outsider who simply discovered what had happened. She had been there. She had lived in the house. She had known parts of Cameron's control. She had participated in the environment that allowed Colleen's captivity to continue. That cannot be erased from the story. But eventually, Janice became the person who told Colleen the truth that Cameron had spent years burying. The company was not real. Those words mattered because Cameron's entire system depended on Colleen believing the opposite. He had used that fictional organization as a weapon. He had placed it between Colleen and escape, between Colleen and her family, between Colleen and every possible cry for help. If the company did not exist, then one of the strongest walls around her had been made from nothing. But even then, freedom was not instant. When a person has lived under fear for years, the truth does not always feel safe right away. Colleen had been conditioned to expect consequences. She had been taught that disobedience would bring punishment. She had been forced to organize her survival around Cameron's rules. So learning that the company was fake did not magically erase years of terror. It only opened the first real crack in the prison, and that crack mattered.
She came to my work one day, and she told me, "We have to get out of here." And she said, Cameron's not in the company. I thought, my God, how could I be so stupid? How could I have bought into this lie for all these years? And then also, of course, I was questioning, why did you wait so long to come to me with the truth? You know, why didn't she tell me this way back 7 years ago?
Did you ask her that?
No. I had to snap out of it because it was like, okay, now we have to come up with a plan. How are we going to get out of here and, you know, with our lives and get away from this guy?
For the first time, Colleen could begin to question the reality Cameron had created for her. The threat that had followed her, beyond rooms, beyond doors, beyond family visits, began to lose its shape. If there was no secret organization watching, then the danger was not everywhere. If there was no hidden network waiting to harm her family, then silence was not protecting them in the way Cameron had made her believe. The lie was still powerful because the fear was real. But now Colleen had something Cameron had worked to keep from her: doubt. Doubt can be dangerous to a captor's control. It lets a victim ask questions that were once too terrifying to touch. What if he is lying? What if my family is not being watched? What if the punishment he promised is not waiting outside? What if the danger is not the world beyond the house, but the man who has kept me here? That shift did not undo what happened. It did not restore the years Colleen had lost, but it changed the direction of the story. Cameron's control had always depended on making his version of reality the only version available. Once Janice told Colleen the truth, Cameron no longer had complete ownership of that reality. The house in Red Bluff had hidden a crime for years. Inside that house, Cameron had controlled language, movement, fear, punishment, and silence. But now, the silence was breaking from within. The person closest to the captor was exposing the lie that kept the captive afraid. There is no way to tell this part of the story without acknowledging its moral complexity. Janice's later actions helped Colleen leave, and her testimony became important in the legal case against Cameron. But helping at the end does not erase the years before it. The story does not require Janice to be simplified into either hero or villain. What matters is that, at a critical moment, she became the person who confirmed what Colleen needed to hear most. The monster Cameron had built in her mind was not real, and once that truth entered the room, the balance began to change. For years, Cameron had made Colleen believe escape would destroy her family. Now, for the first time, she had reason to believe that staying silent was not protection. It was captivity. The fear did not disappear, but it no longer stood alone. Beside it was the truth. And truth, even when it arrives late, can become the first door. By August of 1984, that door was beginning to open. Cameron had controlled Colleen's world for more than 7 years. He had taken her freedom, her sense of safety, and her ability to trust what was real. But the lie that held so much of his system together had finally been named. There was no company. There was only Cameron, and once Colleen understood that, the prison he had built inside her mind began to lose its power. By August of 1984, the lie that had held Colleen Stan in psychological captivity for years had finally begun to collapse. Janice Hooker had told her the truth. There was no secret organization. There was no company watching from the shadows, waiting to punish her family if she disobeyed. The threat that had followed Colleen through every room, every silence, every possible escape route had been created by Cameron. But knowing the truth did not make leaving easy. Colleen had lived under Cameron Hooker's control for more than 7 years. Fear had become part of how she measured the world. Every choice had been shaped by consequences he invented, reinforced, and made terrifyingly real. So even when the central lie broke, she still had to step out of a life Cameron had trained her to believe she could not survive without obeying. That step came when Cameron was away from the house. Janice took Colleen and the children and left. For Colleen, it was not a cinematic rescue. It was not a sudden burst of freedom after one dramatic confrontation. It was quieter than that, more fragile. A woman who had been held captive for years was finally moving away from the man who had controlled nearly every part of her life. Then came one of the most human moments in the case. Colleen called her parents. After years of fear, years of silence, years of believing that the truth might bring death to the people she loved, she finally reached out. That call did not erase what happened. It did not return the lost years, but it marked the first real break between Colleen and the world Cameron had forced her to live inside. Still, the end of captivity was not the end of the case. What happened inside the Hooker home had to be spoken aloud. It had to be investigated, documented, challenged, and brought into court. For years, Cameron had controlled the story by controlling Colleen. Once she was free, the story no longer belonged only to him. Eventually, Cameron Hooker was arrested and prosecuted. The legal case exposed the scale of what Colleen had endured. The kidnapping, the threats, the confinement, the intimate violence, and the psychological manipulation that had kept her silent for so long. In court, Janice Hooker became a key witness against him. Her testimony helped reveal the structure of Cameron's control and the lie of the company. The trial forced people to confront a reality many still struggled to understand. Colleen had not stayed because she wanted to. She had not stayed because the harm done to her was somehow less serious than it sounded. She had stayed because Cameron had built a system where fear replaced choice. The courtroom became the place where that system was finally named for what it was. Cameron Hooker was convicted of kidnapping, rape, and other related crimes. He received a long prison sentence, one that reflected the severity and duration of his crimes. Legally, the conviction gave the case an ending. It confirmed that Colleen had survived something real, something deliberate, something that had been hidden behind the walls of an ordinary-looking home for more than 7 years. But legal endings are not the same as emotional endings. A verdict can punish a perpetrator. It can validate a victim's testimony. It can place facts into the public record, but it cannot give back the years taken from Colleen. It cannot undo the nights in confinement, the fear for her family, the damage to her sense of safety, or the long process of learning how to live outside Cameron's control. For Colleen, freedom was not a single moment. It was a return to life after someone had spent years trying to convince her that life beyond his rules was impossible. And that may be the most important truth about this part of the story. Colleen Stan did escape. Cameron Hooker was convicted. The lie of the company was exposed. But survival did not mean she walked away untouched. It meant she lived long enough to tell the truth. And after 7 stolen years, the truth finally reached the world. The case of Colleen Stan is often remembered through one image: the box. It is the detail people repeat, the detail that makes the story feel almost impossible to comprehend. A young woman kept in darkness, a life reduced to a space no person should ever be forced to endure. But if this case is remembered only for the box, then the deeper warning is missed. Because Cameron Hooker did not control Colleen with confinement alone, he controlled her by changing what freedom meant. He convinced her that escape would not lead to safety, but to disaster. He made her believe that the people she loved were in danger. Because of her choices, he turned love into leverage, silence into protection, and fear into a set of rules she had to follow if she wanted her family to live. That is the lesson at the center of this story. Captivity is not always simple from the outside. Coercive control is not always understood by asking why a person did not leave. Sometimes the more important question is, what did the captor make them believe would happen if they tried? Colleen's silence was not consent. Her compliance was not loyalty. Her hesitation was not weakness. It was the result of years of threats, isolation, punishment, and psychological control. Cameron had built a world where every possible escape route seemed to carry a cost too unbearable to risk. And that is why stories like this still matter. They remind us that coercive control can be invisible to the people outside it. It can happen behind normal doors, in normal neighborhoods, around people who appear ordinary. It can make a victim look calm when they are terrified. It can make a person appear functional when they are being controlled. It can make the outside world misread survival as choice. The danger in this case did not only come from a locked space, it came from a lie repeated, until it became stronger than the truth. For Colleen, freedom did not begin with one door opening. It began when the lie began to break, when she learned that the company was not real, when the invisible threat that had followed her for years finally lost its power. And even then, freedom was not instant. It was something she had to step into after being taught for years that stepping out would destroy everything she loved. That is what survival can look like. Not clean, not simple, not cinematic in the way people expect. Sometimes survival is a phone call made after years of silence. Sometimes it is telling the truth, even when the truth is painful. Sometimes it is learning, slowly, that the world is larger than the fear someone built around you. Cameron Hooker took more than 7 years from Colleen Stan. He took safety. He took trust. He took ordinary time. The kind of time most people spend building a life, making mistakes, loving people, moving freely through the world without asking permission to exist. But he did not take her voice forever. Colleen survived. She spoke. Her story entered the public record, not as a myth or a horror legend, but as evidence of what coercive control can do to a human being. And the most respectful way to remember her case is not to reduce her to what was done to her. It is to remember what she endured, what she escaped, and what her survival helps others understand. A box can be broken. A door can open. But the hardest prison to escape is the one built inside the mind. And Colleen Stan's story reminds us that even that prison, after years of darkness, can begin to lose its walls when the truth finally gets in.